welcome to qiphyedu. Today we'll be looking at Economics A2 level, paper 33, October-November 2023. Alright, let's start. Okay, so for the first question it says, the diagram shows the marginal utility from the consumption of quantities of good X. And what happens to the total utility as consumption of X rises from 1 to 6 units? Okay, so you can see here for the first unit, the marginal utility garnered is actually 10. For the second unit, it is somewhere around here. So I can say it's somewhere around 5. So I'm just going to write that down. For the third unit, it is somewhere around 3. For the fourth unit, it's somewhere around 1. For the fifth unit, it's negative, probably negative 0.2. And for 6, it's probably negative 1. So you can see here, this is the marginal utility. So the total utility is calculated by adding up marginal utilities for each additional unit of a good. So let's calculate the marginal utility for the first, the total utility for the first unit. The first unit will be 10. The second unit, the total utility by adding up the first and second unit will get us 15. The third unit will give us 18, then 19, and then 18.8, and then 17.8. So you can see this is increasing, whereas this one is decreasing. Alright, so something like this. So let's look at the 4 options and see which one tallies with our findings. A says it falls continuously, which is incorrect. B says it falls and then rises, which is the complete opposite. C says it rises continuously. Well, it rises, but it drops, so C is also incorrect. So that leaves us with D, which is it rises and then falls. So answer is D. Question 2. An indifference curve is typically drawn with a convex shape. And which economic concept explains the reason for this convex shape? So an indifference curve is something that looks like this. This is your budget line. This is your indifference curve. So the indifference curve is drawn like this because of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So everything else would not be the answer. A says allocated efficiency, which is not correct. C says Pareto optimality, which is basically when someone is made better off without making someone else worse off. But here we are looking at the margin. We are looking at equal utility. So we are looking at equal utility. So this one is not correct. And D says equimarginal principle, which is also incorrect. This one is actually MUX divided by PX equals to MUY divided by PY. So this one is not the answer, so it has to be B, which is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So the answer is B. Question 3, what is most likely to increase the principal-agent problem? The principal-agent problem is basically the problem between shareholders and managers having different objectives. So A says ensuring the action of agents are known by manager, which is not correct. If let's say the action of agents are known by the managers, then this will not happen. B says linking the rewards of managers with the profitability of the firm, which is not correct, because if let's say linking the rewards of managers with the profitability of the firm is actually enacted, then managers will work and then profits will increase, so this will actually help the company more. C says removing from managers the opportunity to hold shares, which is correct. D says preparing contracts that compel agents to work in the interest of the principal, so this is not the answer, so answer has to be C. Okay, question 4. The table shows a firm's total fixed cost and total variable cost, and what can be concluded from the table. So you can see for output 1 until 6 for total fixed cost, it's the same. For output 1 to 6 for the total variable cost, it's increasing. So we're gonna get the total cost by adding up the total fixed cost and the total variable cost. So this one is 2,000. So that means the total cost is or average cost or total cost in this case will be 2,000. For the second one, we add the total fixed cost and variable cost, we get 3,000. We divide by 2, the average fixed cost would be 1,500. Average cost, sorry. And then for the third one, it's 4,000 divided by 3. And then for 4, 5, 6, that will be the same thing. So here you can see A until D, it says average fixed cost falls, which is correct, because you can see here if we take the total fixed cost and we divide it by the output, it is increasingly declining. If it says average fixed cost is constant, it's incorrect, because it's the total fixed cost that is constant but not the average, because if you divide by a higher number you get a lower number in return. C says average variable cost false, which is not correct. It's actually constant and doesn't rise as well, so answer is A. Question 5, the diagrams relate to industry X. T5 is the original production possibility curve. An improvement takes place in manufacturing techniques in industry X in which changes take place. So takes place in manufacturing techniques, this one will be under dynamic efficiency. So it's for average cost must decrease from ATC1 to ATC2. So C and D are correct. Then the market for X would have to increase, which means the supply would then increase from S3 to S4. And then your new production possibility frontier should be at a point where you'll be able to produce more of good X. You can see here it says industry X, so it coincides with good X, so that means your budget line should be able to produce more, should have a higher quantity of good X, so that means it's from P5 to P7, so it's at P7, so answer here should be A. Alright, so because you can see here ATC1 drops to ATC2, which means there's a price drop, supply increases, which means you can produce more, and then you can produce more, so it should be shown on PPC as an increase in quantity of good X. Question 6, the world's largest coffee restaurant chain purchased a large coffee bean farm in Costa Rica. The farm has research and development facilities to study specific diseases that devastate the coffee bean crop. And how is this type of takeover classified? So the world's largest coffee restaurant chain purchased a large coffee bean farm. This one will have to be vertical backward integration. So integration will look like this. This one is the one from left to right. This one is called horizontal integration, whereas the one from top to bottom is vertical integration. If you are a restaurant chain, that means that you are supplying your products to the end users already. But then if you're only producing coffee, then you are selling to restaurants. Therefore, now the act of actually purchasing a coffee bean farm by a restaurant means that you're going backwards. Therefore, it's called vertical backwards integration, because forwards meaning it's going down, whereas backwards means you're going back to the top. So that means that it's going back to the first stage of production, second stage of production, etc. Whereas you're already at the last stage where you're actually selling the product to the consumer. So this one has to be vertical backward integration, which means answer is C. Question 7, which condition is necessary for a firm to practice third degree price discrimination effectively? So third degree price discrimination is basically a way to actually segregate different groups of consumers. For example, when you're purchasing an item, mostly a service, for example, concession cards for public transport, for example, students and elderly people, the disabled will be able to enjoy a lower price on public transport, let's say 50% discount. So in order for that to be effective, then it has to be a service. There should be different price elasticity of demand, and they should not be in the same geographical location. So A says all consumers and producers must be in the same geographical location, which is incorrect. B says customers must be divided into separate markets, which is correct. C says each separate market must have identical price elasticity of demand, which, like what I mentioned just now, it should be different. D says price undercutting is required to enter a monopoly market, which is incorrect. So answer has to be B. So separate markets, like what I mentioned just now, concession cards for different types of consumers, and they all have different prices of demand. For example, maybe they need to rely on these public transport, so their demand is inelastic. But some people may choose to get a car instead of taking public transport, which means that their elasticity may be elastic. So that's why there is different elasticity of supply. So answer is B. Question 8. A traffic study concluded that there would be significant benefits if 10% of car drivers switched to using motorcycles during peak traffic times, and which benefit of this change would be considered a private benefit. So the benefit that goes to yourself, not to other people. So A, it says faster journeys for those who continue to go by car, which is incorrect. So this one is basically like an actual road, and these are all the cars on the road. Today, if you actually switch to using motorcycle, let's say there's a dedicated motorcycle lane, then you'll be using the motorcycle lane, or you can just zigzag through your way to work. So if it's cars, that means you'll still be stuck. But if you're using a motorcycle, you're able to maneuver your way through because the size of a motorcycle is small. B says faster journeys for those who take motorcycles, so that's correct. C says increased safety for cyclists, which is incorrect. D says reduced level of air pollution for pedestrians, which is incorrect. There will still be air pollution because you're just changing to a motorcycle, so there's still emissions of carbon monoxide and all those things, so there's still air pollution. B says faster journeys for those who switch to motorcycle, which is correct because you can hover through traffic jam quite easily. Question 9, which conditions are most likely to reduce the accuracy of cost-benefit analysis in decision making? So proportion of external costs and benefits to total costs and benefits should be, if let's say it reduces the accuracy, then the proportion of external costs and benefits should be should be high, and then the percentage of total cost and total benefits that are in the future should also be high, so therefore answer here would have to be A. Okay, so in order for the cost benefit analysis decision making to be accurate, it has to have a low proportion of external costs and benefits, and also it has to have low percentage of total costs and total benefits that are in the future. Alright, question 10. What is consistent with a movement towards Pareto optimality? So A says when negative externality lowers the utility of an individual, not correct. B says when consumption of a good is non-rival, which is incorrect. C says when reallocation of resources can make someone better off without making any other person worse off, which is correct, because Pareto optimality is when you get higher units, but then at the same time the other person is also not affected by the fact that you have higher units. D says when trade takes place to make one nation better off at the expense of its trading partner. This one is not correct, so answer is C. Question 11, the diagram shows the short-run supply curve and long-run supply curve of labor, and which area turns from economic rent in the short run to transfer earnings in the long run. So economic rent will have to be everything on top of transfer earnings. So let's say in the short run, this one will be a transfer earning. Then I'm going to use red to show the economic rent. Transfer earning is basically the minimum amount of money needed to keep that particular factor of production in production, whereas the economic rent is anything above your transfer payment to keep that factor of production in place. So turning from economic rent in the short run to transfer earnings would have to be the area itself. So you can see here, like what I mentioned, you can see in the area where I actually colored red, that is your economic rent in the long run, in the short run. But then if let's say it's in the long run, you can see that it actually becomes more elastic, and then the entire portion of Y is gone. Instead, the only place with economic rent is actually at X, which means that Y, which originally should be your economic rent in the short run, has now ended up becoming transfer payments in the long run. So the answer here for question 11 should be C, because area Y used to be the place where economic rent is in the short run, but then in the long run it becomes transfer earnings. Question 12. Sorry, I'm going to change this to blue. Question 12. Which policies might a government introduce to increase the marginal productivity of labor? There should be better education, so AB is definitely out of the question. And tax allowances for capital goods should also be a yes, so answer is D. Better education means that you'll be able to improve your productivity of labor because they have better skills. Whereas for tax allowances, that means that you don't have to pay a lot of tax for capital goods, right? There'll be a reduction. Question 13, what is most likely to increase relative poverty in the country? So A says increasing means tested benefits levels, which is incorrect because means tested benefit levels means that the item itself is actually given to people who are really poor. B says increasing the power of trade unions, which is incorrect. C says making the tax system more progressive, which would actually reduce poverty because people who are less well off will pay less for the income tax. So answer here has to be D, which is removing the national minimum wage, because people who are poor will end up becoming poorer with a low wage. Alright. Question 14, which policy is not designed to correct a market failure? So A, it says government provision of healthcare is to correct market failure, where healthcare itself is a merit good, so A is correct. B says price control of large firms, which is also designed to correct market failure, because price control, like let's say price ceiling for maximum price or minimum price to help reduce the quantity sold or increase the quantity sold. So C, it says regulations to limit sport pollution. This one is under regulation for government intervention. So D, it says introducing import quotas, which is not designed to correct a market failure, because market failure in this case is about actually reducing the amount of items that are imported into the country. But market failure itself is more about public goods, private goods, merit goods in general, the allocation of resources for that. So import quotas in this case is not designed to correct market failure. It's actually designed to is specifically a protectionism policy, alright, not a market failure policy. Then for question 15, to control the cost of living, governments have sometimes imposed a maximum price on certain goods that is below the free market price, and what is often an undesirable effect. So A says accelerating general inflation, which is incorrect. B says an increase in profits above normal profits, which is incorrect. And C says an increase in the stocks of unsold goods, which is incorrect. And D says shortages. Now you need to look at this graph. This is your supply, this is your supply, this is your demand curve. Now imagine that originally your item should be sold at this price, which is, let's say, $5, let's say there's 30. But then now there is a maximum price, which means that it has to be below. In order for it to be effective, it has to be below the equilibrium. So then you are selling at this quantity, but the demand is actually at this quantity. So what happens right now is that the price drops. Inflation will not increase because aggregate demand is now decreased, because now you can't buy the product at that specific quantity. And then an increase in profits is not correct, because you're making a loss if you sell at the same price at the equilibrium but at a lower quantity. And then C says the increase in the stocks, which is, you can already see, is not correct, because that will only happen when you're enacting an effective minimum price. So that's why the only answer is shortage of good, because the supply is 15 but the demand is 45, which means that the demand has exceeded your supply. Question 16, when is an increase in national income most likely to induce an increase in investment spending? So A, it says when firms have spare production capacity, which is not correct. So this is actually the multiplier principle. So A is not correct, because this one is not about the multiplier principle. B, it says when firms use labor intensive production, which is not correct. And C, it says when the increase in income is regarded as permanent, so it has to be C. The income itself has to be regarded as permanent for that particular year in order for the investment increase to be induced. For the investment to increase. Then question 17, what is a function of money? So function of money is that it is a standard of deferred payment. So A says it can be divided into small units. This is a characteristic of money. B says it can be easily carried, which is also a characteristic. In a characteristic, in order for it to be usable, has to be portable. D says it is widely accepted, which is also a characteristic, but the function is to use it for payments, so it has to be a standard of deferred payments, so answer is C. Question 18, the pandemic encourages many workers in developed countries to work from home, leading to a closure of city center businesses such as coffee shops and retailers. And if this way of working continues after the pandemic, what is the most likely result? What is the most likely result? So A says frictional unemployment will decrease, which is incorrect. B says the geographical mobility of labor will increase, which is incorrect. So here you can see here, a pandemic encourages many workers in developed countries to work from home, and then closing down coffee shops and retailers. So because of the fact that now everyone is working from home, this also means that you don't exactly have to go to work anymore, to the company anymore. So that means that people who are working in a company would end up, who have no choice but to work at a company, will now end up having to shut down the centers, and that means that they will no longer work at that place. So that means that they will lose their jobs, because they are not unable to access computers, because their jobs are not related to computers, like for example security guards and operations officers, so on and so forth. So structural unemployment will increase, which is correct. D says voluntary unemployment will increase, which is incorrect. Actually, voluntary unemployment and frictional unemployment, they are related, because frictional unemployment is a form of voluntary unemployment, so that's not correct. B says geographical mobility of labor will increase, which is incorrect, because now they are all working from home. So answer is C. Question 19 is 2020 population census. China reported that the total population was just below 1.4 billion. The birth rate had continued to decline, the number of those reaching retirement age had increased, and the percentage size of the workforce had decreased. And which change of policy would most quickly sustain China's economic growth in view of these population changes? So the population was just below 1.4 billion, the birth rate has continued to decline, the number of those reaching retirement had increased, percentage size of the workforce has decreased. So in order to sustain China's economic growth, you had to improve labor productivity. You need to have more people working in the country. Labor productivity is for economic development. So economic growth itself is just an increase in GDP, so increase in national income. So A, it says allow more immigration of labor, which is correct. B, it says encourage women to leave work to have more children, which is incorrect. Leave work meaning that you have less of national income. C, it says increase research in technology to improve labor productivity. This one is economic development. D says tax the labor force more to pay for the increasing number of pensions, which is incorrect, which means that there will be less income. So answer is A. Question 20, other things remaining equal. What will reduce the level of national income in the economy? So national income in economy. A says the fall in planned savings, which means it will increase the national income, so this is not the answer. B says if a fall in the marginal propensity to import, which means that if there's a decrease in the marginal propensity to import, let's try and see what happens. So let's say it's 0.5, you get 2. If it's 1 divided by 0.2, you get 5. So that means that your national income will increase. So this is also not the answer. C says an increase in average propensity to consume, which is not correct, because an increase in average propensity to consume means that you increase the national income. D says the reduction in level of defense expenditure, which will result in a reduction in the level of national income. So answer is D. Question 21, what according to the accelerator principle will cause the level of investment to fall? So that means it has to be a decrease in the rate of growth of national income, so answer is B. There's no way going around it. Accelerator principle and multiplier principle, they are both related in terms of investment and also your national income, or in this case, aggregate demand. Alright, it has to be these two. Both of these will be related. Question 22, what is measured on the vertical axis of the Phillips curve? So Phillips curve looks like this. So it has to be curved and then straight. So this one is your unemployment rate. So on the x-axis, there's your unemployment rate. And then this is your inflation rate. So on the vertical axis is about the inflation rate. So answer is C. So basically the Phillips curve is used to calculate what will happen, what unemployment rate has on, how does it have an effect on the inflation rate. So that's why answer is C. Question 23, South Africa has attempted to improve the level of economic growth by attracting foreign direct investment. What can be deduced from this diagram about the relationship between FDI and GDP growth between 2008 and 2018? So you can see here that for FDI, your percentage of GDP is decreasing and then it increases again. Then for GDP growth, you can see that in 2018 is a negative growth. So A says the relationship between FDI and GDP is generally weak, which is correct because you can see here the decrease in the FDI as a percentage of GDP means that it should be less affected, but then you can see here GDP growth decreases and then they do not tally as well. B says increases in FDI in line with improvements in GDP growth, which is incorrect because you can see here when the FDI is increasing here, the income is decreasing, so that's not the answer. C says lowering FDI is linked to stable GDP growth. Nope. You can see when it drops, it increases, but then when it drops again, it then doesn't tally, so that's also not the answer. Linked to stable GDP growth, you can see it's unstable. It's relatively unstable because it increases and then it drops again and then it increases again, something like that. D says negative GDP growth is linked to a lack of inflows of FDI. You can see when the FDI increases, the GDP drops, so that's not the answer, so answer is A. Question 24, which change would be most likely to indicate that the country has experienced economic development? So economic development basically, well, way of life, standard of living, increase in GDP and sustainable economic growth. A says appreciation in the country's currency, which is not correct. B says an improvement in the average citizen's quality of life, so that is the answer. Because economic development focuses more on the well-being of citizens, so basically like more like work-life balance, and at the same time also improvements in the economy when it comes to economic growth. Question 25, the table gives some economic indicators for 4 countries, and which country is closest to achieving the principal aims of government economic policy? So achieving the principal aims, so that means the improvement in GDP, low rate of inflation, and also low rate of unemployment. So you can see here for the changes in the GDP, the country with the highest change in GDP should be D, and then the one with the lowest rate of inflation is also D. Unemployment is at 4.6 for D, and then balance of payments is inflow of positive 8.5% of the GDP. All the others here, you can see for the C is out of the question because rate of inflation is very high, and then there's an outflow of money. Same goes for B, and same goes for A. When you compare A with D, you realize that the change in GDP is different. You can see for A is 0.47 only, whereas for D is 1.45. And then the rate of inflation increases to 0.8, for unemployment is lower, but then the balance of payments is lower than D. So answer here has to be D. Question 26. What is a government macroeconomic aim? A government macroeconomic aim would we look at the four options and we will see the answer. A says a fall in the general price level of goods and services, which is correct. B says an increase in monopoly regulation, which is not correct. C says lower taxes on consumer goods, that's not the government's macroeconomic aim. D says a minimum wage for low-paid agricultural workers, which is also not the aim. The aim is actually to reduce inflation, reduce unemployment rates, and also increase GDP. So general price level is related to inflation, so answer is A, because it says a fall in general price level. Question 27. Which rule correctly identifies the characteristics of a low-income economy? So low-income economic countries, they depend on the primary sector a lot, so D is also out of the question. D is already out of the question, sorry. So it's either A, B, or C. Your Gini coefficient value should be high, that means that there is more income inequality in the country. If the Gini coefficient is low, that means that the country has a very low income inequality, which also means that the country is a relatively high income country. And then per capita real income would typically be low, because if it's high, that means that every person is earning a decent amount of money, but then for low income country it has to be low, so answer is B. Question 28. What is the role of the International Monetary Fund? A says to advise countries that are experiencing trade disagreements, which is not correct. B says to help charities providing emergency assistance to country in need, which is not correct. C says to offer short-term assistance to country balance of payments problems, which is correct. D says to provide interest-free credit to the developing country for infrastructure purposes. The International Monetary Fund is actually designed to borrow money to countries who may need help with balance of payments or economic assistance. So A is not correct, D is also not correct, and then B is also not correct. B says to help charities provide emergency assistance. So it's not charities, rather countries in need of money, they'll borrow money, then they'll lend money to those countries, so it has to be C. Question 29. The diagram shows the international trading position of a country that has tariffs on imports. The country removed the tariffs on imports, and what was the quantity of imports into a country after the removal of the tariffs? So the quantity here would be when there is a tariff, the quantity of imports into a country would have to be Q2, Q3, but then after removing the tariff, it has to be from Q1 to Q4. So Q1, Q4 here will have to be would have to be B, so answer is B. Because if you can see here, this is the domestic supply. This curve is about domestic supply until Q2 onwards. Then it has to be the supply of the world, supply from the world, which is completely elastic. Same goes for no tariff. No tariff, when it decreases, then for domestic it only reaches until Q1. So domestic supply is only at Q1, but then for world supply has to be from Q1 to Q4 until the domestic demand. Alright. Question 30. Under which circumstances will low wages and low cost land in a low income country not attract foreign investment in manufacturing? A says if the country creates genuine independence for their central bank, which is not the answer. This one will actually attract foreign investment. B says if the country embarks on a program of privatization, which is incorrect, because if the country embarks on a program of privatization, it will improve FDI. C says if the country lacks well-developed infrastructure, yes, correct, because then it's very difficult to ship raw materials into the country because there is no transport system to provide it. D says if the country permits repatriation of profits, which means the country allows the profits to be sent back to another country, this would also improve FDI, so that's not the answer, so answer has to be C. Alright, so this is the end of this video. I hope you guys find this video helpful. Do share this video out to other people who may need help with Economics A2 level. I hope to see you guys again in the next video. Till then, this is qiphyedu. Goodbye.